All right, so this lecture is going to introduce you to some definitions of public relations, give you some ideas of what is entailed in public relations, um, and start us thinking about this industry, what is involved, and all that good stuff. So, depending on who you ask, the definition of public relations is going to differ. You can come up with several different kinds of ways of thinking about what public relations is, what it entails, um, and depending on who's writing the description or the definition, what's included in the definition is going to be different. The textbook includes several different definitions of public relations. I've included a couple here, so you can kind of think about what each of these has in common, how are they different. Um, but really, at the end of the day, the goal of public relations is to communicate and develop relationships between some entity and the public. Um, the two definitions that I have here are, using words like strategic communications, building those beneficial relationships, mutual communication, mutual connection, um, et cetera, et cetera. So, uh, as you can see from these definitions, we're dealing with something that is kind of broad, kind of vague, and is defined in a million different ways. But really, at the end of the day, the goal of public relations is managing and developing a relationship between two entities, an organization, a brand, a celebrity, an influencer, and the public, right? The people that are perhaps, shopping with or buying or engaging with some component of the brand itself. Um, so you're influencing, you're shaping minds, you're changing perspectives, you're using all of the communication skills available to you to shape and influence your audience, your customers, your clients, etc. So this kind of still feels maybe a little amorphous and abstract, but with some examples and as we progress here, that definition may start to make some more sense. But public relations is everywhere. The idea of managing a reputation, providing transparency and credibility and competency. Um, Companies need to do this all the time. So everybody should benefit from having a PR specialist on their team. You see this in all manners of the industries that I have listed here. In the sports world, in the branding world, nonprofits have PR people, religious institutions have PR people. Politics is a lot of PR. But specifically, if you want to talk about the White House press secretary, the White House press secretary's job is to be the PR person for whoever is in office. That person is sort of the face of the administration in the communication of information to the media. So their job is to answer questions, to provide that transparency, to provide answers to journalists who have questions about policies or whatever's going on. Um, we've got another definition here. Again, right, you're building that loyalty. You're working with different industries to create and craft messages, to work with the news media, to work with marketing teams and advertising teams, to think about a strategy that is going to effectively communicate any given message so that the public is able to understand perhaps a crisis situation or some kind of new release of some kind, a product release, um, and to do it in a way that communicates that competency and transparency, um, and paying attention to who is consuming that information and in what capacity. So as you can see, and as I've mentioned, right, thinking about a definition of what public relations is all about is a challenge. There is no real easy way to define it. It is a constantly evolving industry, especially when we think about things like social media and technology, mass media, and how this stuff is constantly changing, right? The idea of media convergence and the um, overlapping of media forms today, the diminishing gatekeepers that exist in those media spaces, all of which are going to shape how um, public relations is viewed. So when we talk about the career of a PR specialist, today they do a whole host of things. When you think about traditional public relations and the early starts of PR, which we're going to talk about next week, um, that included a lot of press releases, a lot of what are called white pages, communicating with the media. Today, that job is very different. It is um, a multifaceted, always changing kind of profession dealing with all different types of issues. Um, that yes, a PR specialist is going to do the press release writing, right? The social media posts, and dealing with the media kind of in the way that the job was traditionally kind of thought of, but also maintaining that presence online, right? How does a brand or an organization use their social media space to help foster positive associations with your brand, right? You're not selling a product necessarily, but how are you developing engagement, getting your company um, for consumers to feel positively about your company and in some kind of capacity. Events are part of that as well. Doing things like conducting focus groups and surveys to see how people feel about any given issue. Maybe thinking about how you can develop a relationship with the community that your organization exists within. Um, and so on, right? This is just a short list. There are lots of other things that PR people do, but this is kind of to give you, sort of an intro to understanding what it is that is involved. Crisis communication is another one, right? If there is a major catastrophe or a crisis event, the PR people are the ones who are communicating with the media, who are answering those questions, who are providing updates. And that is a huge part of what a PR person might do for a company. Um, so when you're thinking about PR, public relations, and what you do in this kind of role, that it involves thinking about the organization or the client that you're working for. Um, what sorts of message are you there to deliver? How are you able to develop that transparency, that positive association? What sorts of things can you contribute to that role to make your company look good in the eyes of the public. Brands and companies of all kinds have had slip ups, issues, problems that they've had to handle in the public eye, and being able to um, either keep a positive association with the brand, a positive reputation with the brand, or fix a crisis situation is very important, because that's how a company maintains credibility in the eyes of the public. So all of that is done in different ways. It can be done on social media. It can be done through online content, website content, um, and thinking about how to effectively communicate to reach those specific audiences that you're looking for. So there are many, many ways that this is done. It's sort of not a one size fits all kind of process, but the persuasive or the strategic component of it is a big one. So when we talk about public relations, um, it might be important or it might be worthwhile to think about who is the public in public relations. Um, that this, when we talk about various quote publics, right, the plural of public here, we're looking at different groups of people who need to have that positive kind of association or relationship with any given organization, with a brand. And you have your two kind of groups that exist within that public space, which is kind of confusing and a little redundant. But you have your internal and your external groups of people who need to be communicated to, perhaps in different ways, um, depending on the information that needs to be uh, conveyed. right? So your internal publics are the people, we'll just use an organization for our example here, um, are the stockholders, right? The people who have stock in the company, maybe people who supply things to the company, those employees who work for that organization, and maybe some managers and supervisors, right? So they're the people who are directly related to the organization by way of maybe working for the company, or having some sort of invested interest in that particular organization. Um, your external publics for an organization are going to be listed here, um, and are those who are outside of that kind of immediate circle of people who are the internal group of publics. And so in this case, right, your externals are going to be your mass media, your customers, the legislators who may be involved with your organization in some way, the community where your company exists. Um, different authorities, regulatory authorities, um, competitors, right? Those are going to be the external publics for your organization. And how you communicate with each one of these groups is going to be different, right? How a company communicates with its employees is going to be different from how that company communicates with competitors. So messaging has to depend on that. The messaging has to cater to those different needs, and what the audience is needs to hear from the organization. So thinking a little bit about what public relations is, right? We have some definitions, but a lot of times PR and advertising get lumped together. Um, they aren't the same, though sometimes they are operating in the same spaces. Um, but public relations and advertising achieve different goals. Um, PR, as I've said, is important for managing the reputations of your client, in some way that you work with the media to develop that positive media coverage, right? You reach out to journalists, you write press releases, you um, hold press conferences, etc. Right? So you're managing a reputation, and the hope is that the media coverage is positive. Advertising involves paying for that content to be placed in a specific space, right? That a company who wants to air a Super Bowl commercial pays a lot of money to have their advertising aired during the Super Bowl. So it is a different. There are different goals, and there are different intentions. Um, the advertising, of course, you're going to be more interested in those numbers of sales, where PR and public relations, it's a little more difficult to kind of quantify the impact of, say, a good press release or a good interview. So the numbers and kind of the analysis is going to be a little bit different. But as you can see here, right, that a PR goal or a PR effort is going to be something that is more long term. That if Starbucks wants to communicate their like green initiatives or the things that they're doing to reduce plastic, right, that is going to be a long-term effort on behalf of the company, right? They're going to maybe put out some social media stuff about what they're doing. They're going to update the website with some more transparent information. They're going to release press releases and work at that for a very long time. Whereas if Starbucks wants to sell you a pumpkin spice latte, they're gonna create an ad, and that ad is gonna run for only a short segment of the year, though it feels like it's forever, that they do that with the PSL stuff. But either way, right, that there is an end goal, right? That once we start talking Christmas, that the PSL products tend to go away. Um, so that is how we kind of see the difference here, that you can create TV commercials that tell the world what you're doing to make those initiatives more green. But that goal is going to be something long term, right? To get us as consumers to see that and say, okay, that brand aligns with my views on plastic waste or something like that, right? So you're tapping into a sentiment, value systems, belief systems in ways that advertising is not looking to do. So there's, some kind of comparison here, and some, just ways of thinking about it, right? So the next time you see a social media post or a website or a commercial, think about how what's that message? Does it feel like a short-term product ad of some kind, or are they selling a feeling? Are they selling a lifestyle? Um, where is there a difference, and how does it feel different? So when we talk about public relations, um, as you may kind of when you start to think about it, right, the goal of public relations is to persuade. And when you are somebody who has the ability to reach wide audiences through interviews, press conferences, commercials, um, press releases, and so on, there's a lot of power that goes into that. So it is a very important component of the job to be ethical in the um, communicating of information. And so there are organizations out there that have standards for what the expectations are for a public relations um, um, specialist, right? How can we communicate? What kinds of words do we use? What kinds of um, information do we share that is conveying that we have the audience's best interests at heart, that we are providing information and doing things that are thinking ahead to our customers or our stakeholders or whoever it is, um, and doing that in a way that is um, communicating goodwill and um, transparency. So there's a lot of things that need to be done in this space because, as I'm sure you can imagine, if you are somebody who has the ability to influence and persuade, that that power can be abused. So and as consumers, right, it's up to us to think critically about those messages that we are consuming to say, hey, this like press release or this social media post feels kind of manipulative or is doing some persuasion in a way that is unethical, and what can be done to make that communicating um, more ethical in its messaging. And so one of the things I always like to show in my public relations classes is this very short video from The Simpsons, of course, and is just a very quick but um, good way to think about what this acting ethically in a PR space is all about. You can watch the video, I'll post it on Blackboard. But basically, the video clip is showing Lionel Hutz and Marge Simpson here, working in a realtor's office, and Marge Simpson is having some issues, um, quote, telling the truth about uh, um, houses that are up for sale. So Lionel Hutz here is, quote, spinning the truth about these houses, right? It's in the language, it's in the tone, it's in the way that the houses are being talked about that kind of could shape a potential buyer's decision making in ways that are unethical. So a little hard to explain. So just watch the video. It's like just a couple seconds long. It's not a long video at all, but is one way to kind of think about how we need to be careful with our words. We need to be careful with the language that we use, how we communicate an issue or how we communicate a topic to the public, um, by putting maybe some sort of slant or what's called spin on a particular issue. So when we're using that space, that power of having an audience in ways that are unethical, it's important to know that that is uh, not part of the job of a public relations, a good ethical public relations specialist. So what you want to do, obviously, is when you think, as consumers, we want to think about how we perhaps encounter these things um, in our day-to-day lives. We want to avoid spinning information, which is very misleading. It can shape how people think about a particular issue in ways that it's not correct, right? Maybe you're picking and choosing certain things to emphasize in your explanation of any given topic, and that can be uh, really bad for shaping how the public sees or feels about a particular issue. Um, and so, as sort of like a culmination of that thought, the Public Relations Society of America is an organization that tries to hold up some standards for public relations specialists and what the well, get to that in a second, but what the sorts of rules are or what we expect from people who work in the PR world. That you're going to be a good advocate for an issue, that you're going to work on behalf of a client in a way that conveys that honesty, that conveys that transparency, and the loyalty to your particular client or issue, and doing it in a way that is fair to the topic, to the public, and so on. So the PRSA Code of Ethics is one worth checking out because it does explain in detail how each of these kind of comes into play in an industry that, like all media industries these days, anybody can kind of get themselves into it. So you need to be, holding these people to standards, or else it becomes the wild west of sort of, you know, questionable practices. Um, so the example that I'm going to use here for just a very basic public relations example is McDonald's. McDonald's has had over the years some reputation stuff that they've had to come back from, people choosing healthier options, etc. And um, have done a lot to, obviously make their menu maybe a little more healthy. But what they did here is this is from a press release from a couple weeks ago, and they are relying on the positive associations that people have with the brand, right? The nostalgic associations that people have with the brand, right? That positive reputation that people have, or that McDonald's has with consumers, to create this like collector's cup situation, which is something that they used to do back in the 80s and the 90s. Um, and they've put some nostalgic, I believe these are like past Happy Meal toys and merchandise and things on these cups. So they have the Beanie Babies that they had back in the 90s, and they have the Coca-Cola Bear and Shrek and like Hello Kitty and all these like pop culture moments from toys that they've had in the past. Um, and they're relying on people's positive associations with the brand to get people to buy these. So even in the press release, you can kind of see the language that they use to get people in, right? The goal is to sell these cups and to get people to buy McDonald's food, but the hope is that they're going to get people there to persuade people through nostalgia. And so I've bolded some of this in the press release here, but they've, quote, built a special connection, right? The people have built a special connection to McDonald's. Um, and so these like Happy Meal toys and all this stuff unlock core memories around some of our favorite McDonald's moments, right? Has nothing to do with the food, has nothing to do with the stuff you can buy, right? They're relying heavily on the positive associations, the nostalgia that people have. In order to get people to come buy these cups. And that is PR right there. That you're relying on like long-term positive associations that people have in order to get them to come to the store and buy these products. And so as we can see here, and this is our example of media convergence, and we'll get into some more of this later on, but the idea that the McDonald's has posted this press release on Blackboard. You can see it. It now gets covered by the media, right? So you're generating buzz, you're getting people interested, you're getting to reach those audiences that might find themselves looking for one of these nostalgic collector's cups. And the videos here kind of speak to that, right? These news stories, talk a little bit about how these things are going to be like what the cost is for resale. Some local news stations picked up on it, and then there's a promo video as well. So there's a lot of press coverage, a lot of information about these collectible cups. Again, we're relying on positive associations and nostalgia. It even says it in the caption of that photo. Nostalgic emblems of the past to get people to come in and buy their products. So here's just a more explanation of what the PRSA is all about. There's some definitions here. This is also on the website, but this is, again, the code of ethics that the Public Relations Society of America is uh, upholds their public relations specialists to. So kind of in a nutshell here, we have, the PR is a huge an important industry today. It varies from intentions, depending on clients, depending on situations. But really, at the end of the day, it's all about that maintaining of an image, a reputation long term. Um, Celebrities, influencers, companies, brands, nonprofits, etc., all have PR people because reputation and transparency is so important today. And so these kinds of things help to develop those relationships with the public, various publics, right? Help to develop that trust and communicate transparency. And so, as we'll kind of think about moving forward, that social media and technology are going to be influencing the PR world for sure, and what we as consumers expect to see from an organization is changing by the day.